Alright, well tonight I'm doing a little experimentation. I've been trying to teach myself how to do some of this air conditioning work on vehicles and residential stuff. And my little Nissan 1995 V6, it's never cooled very well. And so I've pulled out all the refrigerant and starting from scratch. I am concerned this is a wreck and rebuild. Maybe the condenser is not the factory, maybe it's a little bit small. I'm not sure about that. But I pulled it down and you see here I got 480 microns. And I've been letting the vacuum run now for 2 hours. So I should have a super good vacuum. All the moisture should be out. And I downloaded my specs. It should take, looks like between 26 to 29 ounces. So I'm going to play with this, play with the best I could get out of it earlier. I mean, the pressures look normal, but I could only get like 60 degrees out of the vent. So I'm hoping to have some success with this. So I got my jug of 134A. Okay, I hope you can hear me over the noise. I'll talk a little loud. So what I've read online, there's 3 tests we got to do to make sure things are in balance and working properly. So we got our, number one, we got our subcooling test. That's where we measure the inlet and outlet temperature on the condenser lines. So what I did, I got my little device here with these little clamps. I clamped one right here on the condenser line, then one on this line. Ooh, and that one is hot. So, and according to what I read, you want anywhere between a 20 to 50 degree split difference. So I'm sitting right at like 48 degrees difference. So I'm within spec on that. And then we want what we call, I guess, heat removed from ambient air. So I took one of these little sensors here, and I had it mounted out here about 2 foot in front of the condenser, because it's measuring the air temperature that's coming in. And with that reading, you want to be the ambient air from the temperature of the reading on this sensor out here in front of the condenser versus the temperature coming out of the vent should be a minimum of 30 degrees. So from the temperature right here versus the temperature coming out of this vent, it should be a minimum of 30 degrees. I'm getting 35. So we got that working. Okay, and the third test is your evaporator superheat test. So with that, you put a probe on the suction line right at the firewall, and then one probe on the center vent. And our split should be 0 to 10 degrees difference. And so I'm right in spec. So this is 57 degrees coming out of my vent. Okay, this is 67 degrees. Because this, you see this goes up here, right on the firewall, that's the suction line. So that is within spec. So I think I've done all I can do to get this where it needs to be. I think I end up putting in about 28 ounces. What did it call for? Where's my notes? Yeah, it called for 26, 29. I think I ended up putting about 28 in there. So I'm hoping this will help my cooling situation while I drive it down the road. Of course, it's at night. Okay, well, it's the next day, so now I'm trying to continue on with my diagnosis. Now I'm getting to think, because all my pressures look good, but just ain't cooling well. Even during the daytime, I drive it around, I'm getting about 50-something degrees blowing out. And, you know, it's got to do better than that, I would assume. So I'm beginning to wonder if my thermal expansion valve is stuck open. That's my next thought. That might be it. So I'm going to start tearing things apart here, take the glove box out, these screws, whatever I get into, to see how far I can get. Hopefully I can have access to it, not sure. But that's the next project. To get into your blower motor or evaporator, here's the first step you do. I've got ahead of myself. You pull out these two little plastic plugs. They fit down in the bottom of your glove box. They stick in there at the very bottom. Well, no, they're stuck right here. Just like that. Pull those two plugs out, and that allows your glove box to tilt down really low, so you can get access to those two Phillips screws. Box that off. Then I got a whole bunch of Phillips screws here to take out, get this metal plate out of the way, and we'll see how far we get from there. Okay, got that metal plate out of the way. Oh, by the way, you do not have to take out those two screws, just the center one and all the rest around here. Get that done. So, don't know what to do next, but start taking things apart. So I'll start taking this out, taking these clips off, just hoping I can get this bottom off without, I just don't know if I can get it, how far I can go, but we'll see what we do. Well, I'm getting closer. Got this little device out of here, and I do see my TXV expansion valve back there, which I'm suspecting that might be my problem. I did check my blend doors. You know, they're working like they're supposed to be. You got them back there in the back to make sure, you know, because that could be causing poor cooling. I don't think that's my problem. So I got to do a little investigating. I would have to believe that if this TXV was working, if I check the temperature just before it and just after it, it should be much colder if it was working. If it's stuck wide open, then the temperature is probably going to be about the same. But I'm just trying to, that's my thinking. May not be right, but that's what I'm thinking. Here's my thought process. Temperature going in right there on that small line. 83 degrees. Yeah, 83 degrees on the high side going in. Alright, so if I got 83 there, but I've only got, what I'm getting, 71 degrees. So I'm only getting, you know, just a, I don't know, 10 or 15 degrees difference past the TXV. That don't seem like enough to me. So if it was stuck wide open, is that the symptom I would get? Well, I'm not 100% for sure of my diagnosis, but I think it's a TXV valve. But anyway, if you get into this project, I'm showing you what I've done. I took that one center screw out here to get that rubber piece loose. Took this, I don't know what the heck, I think that's the part of the cruise control. Took two screws out of it, get that out of my way. So next step, got to recover the refrigerant, get these lines loose, and then I got to see how much I got to do. Things are getting loose. I just you know, I just popped these clips off. There's two screws at the very bottom. I removed those, and it's getting pretty loose, so hopefully it'll just drop out from the bottom. We will soon see. Okay, well it don't seem so bad once you take those lines loose. Let's go on the other side. And it practically falls out. Now, there is, I don't think I showed this, there's a nut up here you got to get off, 10 millimeter, and a long extension. You use a long extension. And so she just falls right out. I got to unplug a few wires, get it on the bench, and see what I see. Okay, evaporator is out on the bench. It's relatively clean for a 1995. You know, I've seen videos where people take these out and they be full of leaves and a real mess. There's my TXV valve, which I hope is bad. That would explain my problem. Here's something I don't know what it is or what it does, so I need to research that. Some little electronic device that, of course, it also senses the temperature of the coil and tells something. I wonder if it, maybe that cycles the compressor on and off. That would be my guess. If it got too cold or something, possibly. All right, and just so you know, so if you get the bright out deal, you know, like maybe you think you can take it apart from just taking these front clips off and leaving it mounted. I don't think it's going to work so well, because you can see I don't belong there. Get back there. as you can see, you got the clips back here, and you got clips back here, you know, on the firewall. So those would have to come off. Don't see no way of doing that unless you take these nuts off. Of course, you're going to lose your freon and all that stuff. So I'm going to take these 3 clips off, 4, take the top off, and see what we can see. Okay, well, the top is off. Isn't that pretty? That's a lot of coils. You'd think that thing would freeze me out, but it sure is not. And remember, when you go to take that top off, unplug your little sensor wire from the evaporator. And so now, kind of got to get in here and take some of this apart and see how to test. And they figured out a way how to confirm the TXV is bad. I don't know how to do that yet, but I shall figure it out. I should have talked about a little bit before what the TXV valve does. Of course, this bulb is normally strapped right up here along this pipe. It's always sensing the temperature. And based on the temperature, it controls the flow of freon coming into the coil. So if it's a super hot day, it allows more to come in. If it's really cold, it shuts it down. So where some vehicles have just a fixed orifice, it's just one size, like the Corvette I just did a while back. It has a fixed orifice. It doesn't change, which I think is more simple, less troublesome. But I believe these are probably more efficient, where they can change on the fly. As the demand calls for it, it can change on its own. But it's not so good if it's stuck and doesn't work. Anyway, that's what it is. Well, you can see I got my brand new, shiny new expansion TXV valve. Of course, here's the old one that I believe is bad. But also notice, before I go putting this in here, I'm going to clean this coil out really well, if I can get a hold of it. Not bend any fins. Can you hold up to the light? You can see mostly through it. But I'm going to give it a good cleaning anyways. Won't hurt matters. So I'm going to give it a good scrubbing. I got some mild acid I can spray on there and hose it out well. And we'll see if it doesn't look better. Of course, you can see that coil cleaner. It's really doing its work. Of course, you want to be sure to plug off your ports here so no water, nothing gets inside of the evaporator. She's getting all foamed up. See how it pushes all that dirt out? Just lifts it right out. So I'll get the hose nest down and see if we can't make it look a little prettier. Okay, well, I hit a little bit of a snag. Let me show you what happened here. So this is the correct one, a 39027. So I actually have a 1995 Nissan. This is designed for 1994, so I must have maybe mine's a late 94 or something like that. But anyways, according to the book, it should have taken a 38637, but it would not work. I had to get a 39027. They looked pretty close, but when I went to mount it, I noticed that the disc, instead of being oriented up to the top, it was going to be laying sideways. The threads and stuff were right, but then also the pipes were a little bit like a 1/4 inch lower. Things didn't line up, and this little piece here didn't fit exactly correct. So I knew something was wrong, so I took it back up to O'Reilly's to see what was going on. And luckily, the parts guy had the idea to go the year earlier, and they had it on the shelf, so that worked out. So now I've got my O-rings. I'll put new O-rings on these. Got me some PAG oil. Of course, I'll lubricate the O-rings. Put everything together and start buttoning this part up and see if we can't get some air sometime before morning. Okay, isn't that pretty? Now you want to be gentle and careful as you tighten these up, and you want to be sure to hold the TXV valve perfectly still. Then ease these nuts good and snug. Each one of them. Take your time. Don't need to be overly tight. You got your O-ring there to do the sealing, just because it has to be snug. And so I've got everything snug. Got that done. I'm fixing to wrap the TXV valve in this sticky cork tape stuff. Just want to explain before I put it together a little bit about what this does, the way I understand it, because I think I've said this before. I really don't know what I'm doing. This is my first attempt at doing something like this in a vehicle with a TXV valve. But because as you turn your air conditioning compressor on, the small line is a liquid gas, high pressure. So you got 210 psi coming in here to the TXV valve. So it's liquid Freon. It hits this orifice in here, and then it goes from a high pressure to a low pressure. It's the low pressure that changes state of the Freon that creates the cold. So once that happens, this pipe is going to be extremely cold. It's going to circulate through all these fins around, around, around. And then as the hot air that's in the vehicle passes over it, it gets absorbed and then goes out to the condenser in the front of the vehicle to discharge it, to get rid of it. And your TXV valve, its job is to regulate the flow of Freon. Some vehicles, the older ones I guess, I don't know if the newer ones, I'm assuming most new stuff has TXVs or expansion valves. They have just a fixed orifice. I just did my wife's Corvette, and it had a fixed orifice valve. It just stays one size all the time. And then I guess it relies on pressure switches to turn the compressor on and off to keep it from icing up. That's another thing that can happen, because you think about it in the wintertime, when you turn on your defrost, you're actually turning on your air conditioner, except you're blowing heat, but its job is to remove the humidity out of the air so you don't fog up your window. But in the wintertime, you could quickly turn this into a block of ice. So that's where that TXV valve here, because there's refrigerant in this bulb, and there's a diaphragm right here. So anytime this pipe changes temperature, it changes pressure, and this diaphragm goes up or down and regulates the flow of Freon. So if you go to start your truck up and it's 100 degrees day, this thing's really hot, and it knows, okay, we need full flow, so it's letting the Freon flow. But as the vehicle gets colder and colder, it gets to the point, okay, this evaporator, you know, we're getting down now to like 32 degrees. That's too cold. We're going to turn into a block of ice soon. So then it starts cutting back the flow of Freon. It flows less and less to bring the temperature back up a little bit to regulate it. That's the way I understand it anyways. So I'm going to put my cork tape on there and put things together, and just one step at a time till we get her back together. Okay, the box is all together. Got all my clips in there, and I looked this thing up, this little device I talked about earlier. I believe this is what turns the compressor on and off, possibly electrically, if it gets too cold. Maybe it uses this instead of a pressure switch. It says, hey, you know, we're about to get 32 degrees, getting too cold, let's kick off. So that's my assumption, ain't 100% sure. But got all my clips on here. TXV is in place, so I'm getting ready to bolt this back up. So remember, it looks like it's about, I think we've got 3 bolts that holds this box basically in, and then get my lines hooked back up, pull a vacuum, fan, all that fun stuff. So we're slowly getting there. Looky here, looky, we're getting closer. The box is in. I'll just show up, see here. It's all installed, nice and pretty. That part's done. Got me, be sure to put some new O-rings on here. Lube them up with some PAG oil. Fixing to put those on, and we're going to be about ready to pull a vacuum. Oh, and these are handy. Go to Harbor Freight, get you an assortment of these. Very handy to have if you're going to be doing this kind of work. Alright, tighten things up and hook up the vacuum gauge. Well, I must be getting excited about the prospects of getting this thing back together. I forgot to install the dryer. So I got to do that before I can start pulling the vacuum and hooking up the gauges. So I got the grill off. Very simple to do. You just twist about 4 of these little things, plastic pieces, right here, and the grill just falls off. So let me give me some big wrenches, take this dryer off, slap a new one on there, and then maybe we can start pulling the vacuum. Okay, about to install the new dryer on this thing. Of course, I'm going to lube up the rings, lube up the threads before I put it on. I couldn't find an exact amount of oil to put in this dryer. My research, anywhere from 0.1 to 1.5 ounces, so I hit it in the middle. I did about 3/4 of an ounce. I did notice whenever I was cracking my lines loose, sometimes I'd see oil, so maybe there's too much in there now. I don't know, but that's what I'm going to go with. We'll see how it does. Okay, so dryer's hooked up. I got my gauges hooked up here. Vacuum pump installed. And we'll kick this thing on and let it run for a while. Alright, I'll let that run for at least an hour. I'll come back and see what it looks like. Okay, well this has been running for a good hour and a half now, and I've got it pulled down to 250 microns. And I want to tell you about this cool gauge, because first of all, I'm going to isolate the gauge from the vacuum pump. I'll put this valve here, and I'll turn off the pump. Okay, got rid of that noise. I don't know if you heard that or not. Anyway, so I've turned off this valve to isolate the vacuum pump from the gauge set. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to make sure I don't have a leak. Because you know most people use these standard gauges up here. They're usually alright, I guess, most of the cases. But if you've got a small leak, it can be hard to detect, and it takes a while to detect. You have to sit there and leave those gauges on there for a couple hours to see if it's going to leak down. But with this micron gauge, it's very sensitive. To give you an idea, this is 250 microns. It takes 51,000 microns to make 1 pound on this gauge. So it's absolutely super sensitive. So if I had a minute leak right now, you'd see these numbers would be climbing. And it looks like everything is good. Because as you can see, I've shut this off. I've isolated the vacuum pump so it can't leak back through that. And both valves are open. So this gauge is connected to the high side going to the car, and it's connected to the low side going down here to the truck, into its system. So now I'll shut this off and hook up the my 134A, purge the line, and start drawing it in. Okay, I've been running this thing for an hour and a half now. Let me shut this off. Well, actually, let me turn this valve off first. I'll tell you what I'm doing. Turn that off. Okay. What I've got here is I've turned this valve off to isolate the vacuum pump from the gauges and the system, because I don't want to leak back through. I want to make sure I don't lose my vacuum. And this tells me I've got 260 microns of vacuum on the system. To give you an idea of what a micron is, it takes, I think, 51,000 microns makes 1 pound. So it's absolutely super sensitive. So this is a good way to tell if you have a leak. I know a lot of people use just the standard gauges, and you can tell if you have a leak if you leave them on there for a while, watch it for it to drop. But this thing is very sensitive. So if it sits there and holds for a while, I'll know it's good to go. And then it's went to sleep on me. I'll wake it back up. But then I'll be ready to put the Freon in. I just have to remove the gauge and hook the yellow line up straight, because you don't want the gauge in line while you're putting in Freon. You don't want to contaminate it. And then I'll weigh it in, and we'll see what we come up with. Well, it's been 20 years, but I finally got cold air on this thing. In fact, I had to look it up. See, I bought this thing back 20 years ago. It's 1995. Back when I bought it, it was a wreck and rebuild. And so I think here's what happened, because ever since I got it, it never did cool very well. I thought, well, maybe it's just the nature of it. But I'm sure that now that it wasn't. Now that I changed the expansion valve, or TXV valve, I finally got like 46-degree air going down the road. But one thing it happened to me. I was putting the Freon back in it, because I made a mistake, maybe because I used the book and I put in exactly, I think, 26 ounces, and without stopping to check before I hit the mark. I just put in 26 ounces and started checking. I noticed it wasn't that cold, and I got to thinking about this. I remembered, because there was a wreck and rebuild, all this was tore out, and they put another condenser in it 20 years ago. They bought an aftermarket condenser, and I've noticed when I got online looking, no other condensers look like this. So I'm thinking this may be undersized a little bit from the original condenser. So if that was the case, that would mean I need to run a little less Freon. So I pulled out a few ounces. Then I finally started getting some good temperatures. So the combination of, I think, having an aftermarket condenser, the fact it was wrecked and it was left open to the atmosphere for no telling how long, months probably, that probably messed up the expansion valve, where it's exposed to the weather. So I think, I got my new dryer installed, and I'm happy with it now finally. But I have been looking at the newer condensers that they make. You can see this has got the old pipe. The new replacement condensers that they make for this has that is it called, like micro perforated tubing? I forget what it's called. Micro channel technology, I think it's called. So that might do a better job of getting rid of the heat. So, you know, in the future, if I have any more issues, I might upgrade the condenser. But right now I'm tickled. If I can get 46 degrees going down the road on 90 degree day, I'll just leave it be. So anyway, this old truck is back on the road again and still giving me pretty cold air for something that's got over 100,000 miles on it. Hope you learned a few things or two off this old truck and air conditioning system. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.